Hello, winners, and welcome to Two for the Win with your hosts, Nick and Wil. So, we went a little deep last week. We talked about Carl Jung and leadership, and we were able to cover part of it, not all of it. And so, we are going to complete the circle, so to speak, and talk about Carl Jung in leadership and the shadow personas. And again, to kind of summarize what we talked about last week and what we'll be talking about today, self-awareness is the meta skill of the 21st century. So buckle up. We got more to share. But before we do, please be sure to subscribe, share, and follow Two for the Win on your favorite platform. I want to give a shout out to our Amazon best-selling author, Nick Menard, and nickmenard.com and the 1% Push Legacy. Happy Monday, Nick.
Happy Monday, Wil. Hello, winners.
Hello. So I know when we first were discussing this topic and we had the podcast last week and went through it, you were kind of like, okay, like wait and see. But actually, you really got into it. You had a lot of thoughts to share, which is
Absolutely.
cool.
Loved
And
it.
that. And so thoughts about the part 2 we have coming up today? Any high level
No, I'm
thoughts?
excited. I mean, last week when the episode ended, I felt like we could have talked a lot more about different part of definitely the last few points of the jungle episode, like we called it. So
Yeah.
so definitely something that that we can continue to talk about, and feedback is always welcome as well. And so when we hear people saying like that they love something, we want to do more of it. So that's why we're back.
All right. So, all right, everyone. Before we buckle up into it, we do have our favorite segment to do coming up. So, are you ready, my friend?
I'm
Let's see if
ready.
we can get this. All right. Here we go. Quote.
Quotes
And
and
Will.
whips.
Oh, that's all right. That was my fault. I bungled that one. That was on me. All right. So the first quote is from Aristotle. We're
Mm.
gonna go ancient wisdom here. And Aristotle's quote, which ties to today's episode, of course, is knowing yourself is the beginning of all wisdom. Thoughts on that?
Yeah, I mean, when we talk about leadership and the way to lead people and things like that, it comes from a place of truth. And if it's not coming from a place of truth, then you have an issue. So you need to know yourself in order to be able to portray that to others and show confidence when you lead. And so, you know, knowing yourself means a lot of different things. But for me, it's like understanding that when people are led by you, they will trust the fact that you have their best interest in mind, and that you're not a fake person, or that you not act like someone like that, but that you actually mean it. And it comes with time. When you come to a new organization, or you have a new business and you bring people in, it takes time to build. So you need to know yourself and know that you are the true self that you portray to others, and not try to act like someone that you are not, just to get their buy-in on the short term, because short term buy-in usually means very bad thing long term. So be right from the beginning, be your true self, and people will recognize who you are, and they will trust you a lot further. And trust is key for any kind of relationship, including leadership.
Yeah, totally agree and well said. And when I think of know thyself, with the Aristotle quote, I kind of think about I would say over the last 10 years in particular, where for me personally, I've accepted the fact that I'm never going to be perfect. Because I've always
Wow.
driving, always, no, I always try to drive, to be perfect and things like that. And sometimes it would be that drive would actually inhibit me from doing things right because I felt like imposter syndrome or I didn't know how to do something or whatever and wasn't sure if I could learn it type of stuff. And so it would inhibit me, but it actually created such a level of freedom and relief because knowing that it's okay, I'm never going to be perfect. It's okay to make mistakes as long as I learn from those mistakes. It's okay if maybe I lose my temper on the road while somebody's driving. It doesn't mean I'm a bad person. It just means I made a bad decision in that moment to give them some colorful language. So, and it's just, but it's actually been very liberating on it. And but it also, um, unveils opportunities for me to learn and grow. So when I'm on the road and somebody cuts me off and I call them some colorful names, that's a mirror for myself to be like, okay, why am I taking this personally? Why am I allowing my emotions to get the better of me when these people aren't spending a second of a second thought about how it may have angered me? Like, so it's really helpful, and it kinda leads me into now our quip, and the quip is from Carl Jung. So, this is from, the main person we're gonna be talking about today in his shadow personas. "Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life, and you will call it fate." So
Ooh.
yeah.
Well, it made me think of what we talked about last week, like, and I shared that yesterday. I mean, last week as well about the fact that you know who you are, and that comes to the quote. You know who you are, you know your qualities, you know your or get challenged. And in business, when you have, like I mentioned last week about the fact that I tend to take a lot of risk, you know, and but I recognize that. And when you recognize something, it's part of the growth, Now, if you recognize it and you don't work on it, then you happy where you are, or it's very hard to change you. And I think when we're leaning toward one way, it's you always gonna lean that way. But you try to get more to the center. When you look at the X or the plus sign, you try to get further and further away from the extreme and closer to the middle, so you can interact better with people from the other side. So in my case, I like to take risk. And when I'm like you in the sense of when something needs to be done, let's start with a point 0.5 version. Let's not
Mhm.
try to have like a million meetings just to get to the start when we know at the start it's going to be more things to change anyway. So let's start directly, see the outcome on a short, on a small amount of people or region, and then you can scale it as you tweak it. And so I will never become someone who will want to have 100 conversation before starting something, but maybe I can have 10 instead of 100. And no, I feel like after one conversation, okay, let's do it, and let's see how it goes, and let's adapt week by week or month by month, depending how big the project is. And so I will always be on the left side, on the person who try to start. But if I get to understand, okay, maybe we need some meetings to explain the why we want to do this way, instead of doing it directly and feel like rolling your eyes. Like I said, I have a very strong nonverbal. Let's try to let's try to smile, not and explain maybe in more detail that I would like to why, and then people may open up a lot faster, and I will have a lot less roadblock along the way to get where I want to be. So by being smarter and more patient, maybe I will probably get further to what I want to accomplish. And so that's probably what I think of when I'm listening to this quip.
Yeah, yeah. No, it's great, and again, appreciate the vulnerability and sharing. I think, it was funny. I had a little chuckle when I first read it because, um, when I was younger, I would say, like, late teenager, early 20s, I had this thing about fate. And I'm like, "Oh, why does this always happen?" Right? That was one of the things I remember saying to myself, why do these sort of things always happen to me?" And this is going to lead into further what we'll talk about today and what we talked about last week with the shadow personas. So, some of the reasons these things would repeat and kept happening to me is because of my shadow persona was actually unconsciously per you know, perpetuating it, and I didn't have the self-awareness or the conscious awareness to identify it, and that's why those things would repeat, even if they were slightly different situations, the fundamental aspect of it was the same, and I think about, a few people that I interact with from time to time that, either were friends back in the day in Wisconsin or even some family members and stuff, and when they start talking about fate or destiny, and I immediately start thinking of Carl Jung's, like, shadow stuff, but I don't I don't get into the those sort of conversations don't resonate with them, so I don't go down that path with them. Maybe I should. Maybe I should give them another shot. But it's like, no, the reason the same shit keeps happening to you is keeps doing the same shit over and over again. But they don't realize it. They're just blind to it. And I think you know, one of the things that going back to the car analogy I gave with like road rage when I get upset. One of the things that Carl Jung talks about is things that irritate us about others can actually help deepen the understanding of ourselves. So I was reflecting on this recently with some work meetings I had, and some of these meetings I was getting very um, agitated about, right? And I'm like, what is it that's really agitating about it, right? Because there's different ways to be successful, and it doesn't, I know there's not it doesn't have to be my way in order for something to succeed. There could be multiple ways about it. But when I like to talk about micromanagement since that's been a hot topic, in my world lately. Um, why does that irritate me so much, right? Is it because interpret it as, well, it's a lack of trust, right? Whereas the alternative viewpoint could be, no, it's to raise urgency and accountability to make improvements quicker. Both can be true. It's a matter of perception, right? But for me, it conveys a lack of trust. And so that's why I get upset about it, even though they're thinking about it in a different way, right? And so anyway, so when we first talked about Carl Jung's personas, there were 3 shadow personas we talked about. It was the controller was one, it was also the rescuer and the avoider. So, if you're getting intrigued and you didn't hear last week's episode, it's okay, you can continue to listen, but if you wanna hear about the controller piece, which we spent a lot of time on, check out last week's episode. Now we're gonna, cover the other 2 in more detail, which is the rescuer and the avoider in terms of the shadow personas and how it relates to leadership, but it can apply in other areas of life as well. Obviously, Carl Jung was a behavioral psychologist, not just we're just giving it the business lens, for this. So, shadow pattern 2, the rescuer, the core fear, again, just as a reminder from last week, it's the fear of rejection or disappointing others. At a deeper level, it's like, if I don't help, I'm not being valuable. So that's the core essence. And again, like we talked about last week, these shadow personas they come from actually places of strength. And so you're over indexing on strength. So the things that you do well that allowed you to do well in your job, allowed you to do well in your business, allowed you to get promoted or to grow your business. Sometimes if you over-index on them, those are the things that can obviously, or not obviously, but could subconsciously start causing some behavioral pattern issues that actually impede your leadership or impede your self-entrepreneurship progress. So the behavioral pattern, for example, are solving problems before others struggle. We talked about the training wheels on the bike analogy and taking those off last week. Jumping in to save time. So, like, wow, I'll let you talk, but I do this. This is hard for me because I'm like, get to the point. And I got to like throttle back. Avoiding accountability conversations. We've talked about that in a number of episodes over time. Over investing in low performers, and I have some names running through my mind right now that I won't mention, but yeah. And then becoming the emotional support system, on that one. So those are the behavioral patterns of the rescuer. Curious, Nick, about your thoughts. Where have you seen like patterns of the rescuer and how have you helped maybe coach others to identify that and take a alternative approach?
Well, when I when I hear about everything you just mentioned, it's clearly something that it's predominant for people who are amiable. Like
Mhm.
people who tend to be liked. People don't like conflict. So usually those people, and in corporate and even in businesses, when you see people like that, usually they are very well liked by people because they want to please everybody. They want to be the person to go to when you have issues and things like that. And they love that. And that's why it hurts them so much when they make a mistake, because they will be seen as not perfect. And the amiable love to be great with everybody. The problem in leadership, when you encounter people like that, is that they will have difficulties with difficult conversations. They will not analyze what's happening, the datas or the behavior in the team the same way, because they will try to see everything good in everything instead of also seeing what are challenging. And so as a leader, when you deal with people like that, I would mainly coach those people one on one, not in a public, like in a group kind of meeting. The
Mhm.
worst thing you can do with those people is, you know, showing their issue, their challenges, their mistake in front of others, because that kills them inside. And so you need to show a lot more, empathy with them in one on one, but make them realize that what they're afraid of is going to happen if their behavior don't change. And in a way that, and it's something that I know you were fantastic at, that is empathic accountability is what we
Mhm.
call that. And that's what you need. You need to hold them accountable while bringing empathy to it, but make sure that they understand at the end of the meeting that it is critical for them to be successful, and for them to continue to be seen as the way they like to be seen. So
Mhm.
it's more of a game. And I'm more of a struggle for me like this, because I'm a boom, boom, boom kind of direct person. I,
Yeah, the
I care
controller.
about
Yeah,
people, but I
yeah.
care differently than that. I much rather
Mhm.
have my leader as well. I much rather have them coming straight to me and said, "Hey, this sucks. This was unacceptable. Here's what needs to be done." And I'm like, I'm not gonna do it, and then move on. I'm not gonna have a pre notion or like a bad feeling about that person, because it's business. But not everybody have a thick skin like this, and
Mhm.
those amiable usually do not. And so it's a very fragile kind of way to handle it. But I know some amiable people who are very successful, because in public they have that image, but behind closed door they do the work they need to do.
Mhm.
Or when they coach people, also they will have more direct conversation, but never in a group settings. Usually those people in group settings are the everything is beautiful, everything is great. But in one
Mhm.
on one, they need to be able to have those difficult conversations and those coaching piece. But they use always a lot more empathy. So those meetings are longer. When
Mhm.
you deal with people who are more direct, or you're more driver or things like that, um, it's gonna be shorter meeting, get stuff done and move on. So that's
Mhm.
another aspect of it. I know you and me, we're more into GSD, get stuff done,
Yeah,
and
yeah,
KISS, keep it super simple. And
yeah.
then, but those people I feel are the opposite.
Yeah, totally agree, and, when I reflect back, so I'm at a point in my life now that I've spent far more time in leadership positions than in individual contributor positions, but I can reflect back to the very first time I earned a leadership position. I was working retail, at Champion Apparel, and I became 3rd key, which, yeah, the store manager, assistant manager, and 3rd key. So it's kinda like a part-time leader position. It wasn't full-time, but it was like 30 hour anyway, the key meant I could open and lock the door for the store. Woo! But anyway, but I remember when I got the 3rd key position, and then because in retail there tends to be a lot of attrition, I rose quickly, and eventually became store manager. But as I reflect back in that period of time, I found myself, this was one of my shadow personas, the rescuer, because I so wanted people to succeed. I so wanted to be helpful to people so that they could achieve more. In retail, we didn't get commission. We got paid hourly, but that was my mindset, right? Like, if you're gonna do something, why not do it well? So it wasn't really about the getting paid more. Is about, how do we make our store grow even faster? How do we rise in the rankings of our district and stuff like that? But I would be more the rescuer. I tolerated lower performance longer back then. I also avoided having direct conversations longer than what I did now. So those were things that I identified that I had to improve, otherwise I would never be anything but at best a mediocre leader. And that was never part of my identity that I wanted to be known as a mediocre leader, right? I once I shifted my paradigm of no, by enabling poor performance or avoiding those conversations around expectations and holding accountability in an empathetic way, I realized I was actually doing them more of a disservice and I would be doing them a better service if I held them accountable, if I didn't tolerate low performance and kept the standards of excellence. And that has made a tremendous difference in the quality of my leadership. And I'm not saying I'm anything great shakes. I'm just saying I'm a much better leader than what I was when I first got into leadership in my very early 20s. If I had kept that same approach, there's no way where I would be as where I'm at today, with still plenty of room to grow. So,
Wow. That's powerful because it shows that you can start a certain way, but learn from it and actually not be like that anymore, but going to the other side or more direct approach. But that's probably why you have a very good way to still show empathy, maybe faster than I do, because it was your side when you started leadership.
mm.
So you understand them better and you're able to portray that. So it's interesting. You see, I learned something new about you that I didn't know.
Yeah, yeah, it's all good. Yeah, it's always on a journey of growth, that's for sure. I'll continue until I take my very last breath. All right, so, the cost of the shadow, the cost of the rescuer, and Nick touched upon it, and I did as well as a little bit, but you're actually enabling learned helplessness, right? Because you're protecting people so much, they never really have that chance to grow because you're trying to do everything for them or protect them from making a mistake. It also creates an uneven performance culture because, again, if you're enabling low performers to remain low performers longer, that's going to upset your high performers, right? Because it's like, why should I be busting my tail to make these great results when someone else is making similar to me or whatever? And they're not making that kind of impact. So it creates an uneven performance culture, could actually lead to culture issues. It also leads to leader burnout. And obviously, we touched on this a lot, so I won't belabor the point, but reduced accountability. So, your leadership takeaway winners, when it comes to if you're noticing a shadow persona that aligns a little bit to the rescuer mentality, is support without accountability creates dependence, and true leadership develops capability rather than rescuing people. And I know you've talked about that in a number of episodes over the year about how um, you delegate meetings to your team to lead as an opportunity for growth. You give them different projects or aspirational targets and let them figure out the way. Obviously, you're always there to help them and answer questions, but you give them that safe space where it's okay to make mistakes, but you learn and grow, and they become stronger for it. And that's why you got very strong followership, and you also have a very strong track record of cultivating leaders, which I know is your measure of success for yourself. Are you cultivating the next group of leaders? Which you do.
Thank you, Will.
Yep. Yep. All right, shadow pattern number 3, we'll wrap up with this one, the avoider. The avoider, the core fear is fear of conflict, damaging relationships. The behavioral pattern is delayed feedback, passive communication, tolerating poor performance, consensus-driven decisions. So as you can see, there's some overlap a little bit with the rescuer, but it's different. The rescuer is kind of like putting on the cape. I will help you. I will do everything for you. The avoider is more like if you're on the YouTube, you saw Nick do like the beware symbol. It's hey, no, I'm just trying to avoid having any kind of tough conversation or any type of tension type of situation. And so, um, the cost of this shadow, and then I'll pivot over to my friend and co-host Nick to share his ideas on it. Is, you can have declining standards, you have culture drift, quiet resentment. Like, what's one of the hot topics the last few years? Quiet quitting, quiet resentment, and talent loss, regretted attrition. But I'm just curious in your take as you reflect a little bit about the rescuer. and then you think about the avoider. How do you see those as being nuanced difference, and how do you guide people when you do notice that pattern of behavior?
I think from my perspective, from my point of view, the rescuer have a chance to be successful. It's gonna be a longer way. It's gonna be more painful, I think, in general for him or her to get there because of their personality type. The avoider, I mean, how do you
Yeah,
call it?
avoider.
The
Mhm.
avoider chance of success is extremely low to nil, to to zero. And we both know, like when I start leadership, with you like 8 years ago, I have not named the name, but I had someone in mind that was like that. That was always like, hey, everything is red, but they are amazing people. They do everything they can. They don't deserve to you know to not to be successful this year because they do everything right. It's the client's fault. It's the region fault. I mean, basically, it's pointing the reason why something is not successful to the outside world, but
Mhm.
for every single person in that team. Like it's like they're all fantastic people. They just are red, and it's just because of the color on the sheet. But they are as good as people who are green. So they just have not blinders, but they are blind.
Mm.
Blinders are at least you see something. When you put your hands in front of your eyes, you don't see anything. And those are the avoiders. Um, they always have an excuse for every problem. So when we talk about on this podcast, we talk a lot about the ladder of accountability. Well, they are in the bottom. Yeah, exactly. Like if you jump on YouTube. So basically, the avoider are the last two steps all the time. So how can you be led by someone like that if you have any kind of desire to be successful? You're gonna be they're gonna be happy with you being average, and it's the definition of craziness to me. Like average is not successful. All right. And that's something that I keep repeating because the importance of it is that we said with the 1% push, success compounds,
Mm.
but so does mediocrity. And so if you're not getting a percent better every day, to put it from my philosophy, you get a percent worth because you don't stay the same, because competition are getting better, your peers are getting better, your partners are getting better. You don't stay the same, you get worse. So it compounds as fast as it compounds to get better a percent every day. So you get worse every day 1%. So actually, as a leader, you should never promote someone as a leader who have that mentality. Who what's the average? I want to be there because if I'm there, I'm safe, and safe is the enemy of business you know and so the avoider, I avoid them completely. And as a leader, that's my responsibility to promote people. I can have a great above average individual contributor, but when they are not great at one topic and their reaction is, well, but look, I'm still not last in the team, which I heard already. That's for me a big light bulb coming in. I'm like, pay attention. That person has not the mentality who is needed for anything, but definitely not for leadership, because they're going to bring that to them. A leader usually got the reflection of their own for their teams, and you don't want that as an avoider. So that's my 2 cents about it.
When you went to the ladder of accountability, I gave you an internal fist bump because that's exactly how I think about it too. The avoider is the victim rungs of the ladder of accountability. It's excuses, it's other things, and that is one of the key differences in my mind as well between the avoider and the rescuer. The rescuer, it's, "Hey, we can do it, but I'm gonna try to help you do it," instead of letting people do it on their own. The avoider is excusitis. That it's a disease of excusitis in my mind. Um, I don't have anything else to add. I thought you crushed it with that. So, well done with that. So we'll wrap up with a few things. At Two for the Win, we not only talk about things conceptually, we try to give you some brass tacks things you can apply as soon as you're done listening to this podcast, if you wish. So some of the shadow discovery questions to help foster your own self-reflection and to see which of these shadow patterns sometimes may be surfacing in different situations. One is, what criticism do I hear repeatedly, right? So if you hear, I'm not saying a one-off because you can never please 100% of people 100% of the time, but if you're hearing a consistent pattern of criticism, reflect on that and see if maybe that's articulating a shadow persona that we talked about. What situations trigger strong reactions? I shared my example earlier about certain meetings and micromanagement and how is triggering strong reactions. Why is that? What is that telling you? Um, is it really necessary to be reacting in that strong? Because sometimes the more emotional you get, the less effective you become because you lose credibility in certain situations if you're over indexing on emotion. When do I feel the need to control? What behavior do I justify most? What strength might I be overusing? So again, none of us are perfect. We will all, I personally slip up all the time, but the thing that I try to continue to focus on is reflecting on that, identifying that, and then how do I tweak, right? How do I make it a little bit better? So the things to watch for, again, if you didn't hear about the controller, check out last week's episode. But for the controller, are you noticing somebody who struggles to delegate, who redoes a lot of work, micromanagement? Those are all there's a lot more, but those are some points of controlling. The rescuer, taking on others' responsibilities. Oh, don't worry, I'll take care of it. That sort of stuff. The avoider, postpones difficult conversations, excuses. That to me, like how Nick said it, was perfect. There are lower rungs of the ladder of accountability, and the victim runs in excuses. So, any last closing thoughts on your end, my friend, before we wrap up today's episode?
Avoid the avoiders.
There you have it. So that'll wrap up this two-part section of Carl Jung, Leadership and Shadow Personas. Hope you enjoyed it. You have other ideas, please share with us. We're happy to explore different areas and topics on Monday Mindset. I want to give a shout out to Nick Menard and nickmenard.com for his Amazon best-selling book, The 1% Push Legacy. And please be sure to subscribe, share, and follow Two for the Win on your favorite platforms. That'll do it for this Monday, winners. Take care. We'll see you next week.
Bye, winners.